hosting you here today. As I heard you all gather, I was reminded of why I work with women. Because, it just sounds so different when we're together. We support one another, we give each other compliments. We draw upon conversations that you never hear when in mixed company. And so that's one of the reasons that after 15 years of working with leaders, I started focusing about 5 or 6 years ago into working more directly with women. And it occurred to me, what is it that's so different about us? We've got definite differences, but we've got these advantages that I saw not so much leveraged in the workplace as they could have been, right? You guys have probably all been there. And having come from background of technical environment, those of you that are in male-dominated workforces know what that feels like. So I started thinking, I know that we're good. I know that we are good leaders. I know we're natural leaders. We do it in so many different areas of our lives, not just business. Why is it that we haven't been able to be quite as effective or prevalent in the business world? So I started doing a little research on it, and I wanted to share that with you today. I'm going to share with you what I find fascinating, what I find depressing, and what I think probably needs to change. So the fascinating part is some of the research that's being done now. There's quite an undercurrent of women taking a more visible role as leaders, and I think there's a national movement going on. But I want to start off with a quote that I often share, and I have this on my website because I feel so strongly about it. It's from a woman named Marie Wilson, who founded an organization called the White House Project, which is an advocacy and research outfit in New York for women, not just in business, for other areas as well, including nonprofit and politics. And here's what Marie says. This is really what kind of got me started on a lot of this. She states, "Often in my work, I hear people say that the lack of women in leadership is an issue that pales next to world crises: global terrorism, fragile economics, inadequate health care, access to quality education, corporate greed. They see no connection between the frightening situations we're in and the fact that few women sit at the table to determine the solutions. No wonder we're where we are today. This fundamental imbalance with men running the world and women, mostly spectators, often victims, is not a trivial detail. It is the problem. It's also the one solution we have not tried and the one most likely to work." That really stung me. It just hit me as, wow, we're really needing to step up to the plate. And those of us that are in positions, as all of you are, leadership positions, you know what that looks like. I'm not talking about being in a C-suite position at a Fortune 500 company. Often it's just what's our little world and how do we want to influence just a little bit more. So with what's fascinating, looking at where we are and what our benefits are, our attributes as women. McKinsey is a research outfit, and they've published a couple of papers recently about women and how women matter. And one of the areas that they've researched has to do with the 9 business drivers that they identify for any business. They say there's really 9 business drivers that they believe are strong to advocate for a good business. And of those 9 drivers, women are more prevalent in making those happen. So in their research, they see that businesses where there's women in leadership, those 9 business drivers are at play more often. They also identify 9 leadership characteristics. And of those 9 leadership characteristics, guess what? Women adopt 5 of them more often than men do. We've got a natural way of doing this. Okay, so let's take the top Fortune 500 companies, stack them up based on nothing other than the number of women in leadership. And the top 25% outperforms the bottom 25% on a return on equity by 53%, when they're ranked by nothing other than how dominant women are in that workplace. Interesting, isn't it? Women make, as you know, 80% of the consumer decisions in the world because we're great shoppers. But we also buy half the cars, half the computers, we're half the shareholders. I just look at where we are and I think it's right to have women more represented around the country. It's a fair thing to do, but my God, isn't it really a good business decision too? Wouldn't you really want to do it, especially if you're in a business that buys and sells consumer goods? So that's what's fascinating to me. Wow, we've got really good potential leverage in what we're doing. But here's what's depressing. Organizations, most of them, more than 80% of them, believe that gender equity in a workplace should be something that they strive for. But guess how many people actually do something about it? About a quarter of them. About a quarter of them have the sort of diversity and inclusion type efforts that they say is a good thing to do, but they don't really do. 40% don't even have it on their radar. Nothing going on there. Of the Fortune 500 CEOs, 11 of them are women, down from 15 last year. We're seeing a backslide in some areas. I know I'm depressing you, I can tell. We're more than half of the workforce. As of 2009, we're 51% of the workforce, and it's probably a little more since then. But we're 18% of leadership. We're 13% of executive positions at CEOs. We're just not being able to move up into positions of influence that we would like to be. Now, women don't necessarily want to have those big CEO positions. I mean, would you agree? You all love the world you work in, and if I had to ask you, what do you want to do to be better? Most women state, I just want to make a difference. I want to do something that matters, and I want to make a difference. And that hits women. But of course, if you're in a position of high authority, especially at a Fortune 500 company, you could probably make a little better impact. You've got a lot more authority, and you're more likely to be able to do something. So we take a look at, that's fascinating and what's a little bit depressing. What do we want to do to help change that? What needs to happen in order to change that? Well, I think we need to look at a couple of different things. I think we need to look at our role, and I think we need to look at how we're developing ourselves for that role, because the way that we perceive ourselves is probably not completely the way that we always want it to be. I mean, wouldn't you say that those of us that are baby boomers, which I'm at the tail end of, we had role models. We had great role models for building a family and being in the community, myself included, with my mother and my stepmother. But neither of my parents really worked. Neither of my mother or my stepmother really worked. My dad's did, but I really didn't have a female role model. Most of us our age really didn't. And if it was someone that was in the workplace, I'm sorry to say, but the early women that helped break the barriers for us, thank God for them, but they were kind of, excuse the term, they were kind of ball busters. So they scared a lot of people. They really scared a lot of people. So without having the role models for us, I believe that it's affected our generation's self-confidence. I think the incoming generation is actually doing fine. They're going to have issues with the other way around. They're a little bit overconfident. Sometimes they're rolling over people. But there's many women that are in their 30s, definitely 40s, 50s, and 60s that are running the country right now that have not had the role models that the incoming 20-something-year-olds will have. And that's affected where we think we need to be and what our self-confidence is. And you know what's interesting that happens in a male-dominated workplace is when you're a minority, you start questioning yourself. And you start putting your own natural tendencies, you let them kind of be stepped on. Rosabeth Moss-Cantor is a business expert that comes out of Harvard Business School. One of the research studies that she had identified that at about 30% of any representation in any environment, whether it's a minority in a school or whether it's women in a workplace, at about 30% you start becoming significant. But when you're below 30%, you're an anomaly. You aren't really heard. How many of you would say you work in a male-dominated work environment? Almost, at least half of you, probably a little bit more. So what happens with that, and this happened to me in engineering, it still happens to me because I work really strongly with technical organizations because my background's engineering. I'm real comfortable in those arenas, but I find that what I do is I start suggesting something using my natural feminine approach. And next thing you know, they're looking at me like I've got a third eye. And I'm thinking, now what was so weird about that? You know, things like collaborating, things like being inspiring, things like being role modeling, all of those are natural leadership strengths that women are very good at. And they're not always so natural in a male-dominated or a technical work environment. And so we start thinking, when we're less than 30%, we start thinking, wow, am I really way off base? Am I really doing this the natural way? Are they looking at me like this isn't the way to do it because it really isn't the way to do it? So we start questioning ourselves, and we have a little bit of self-confidence issue. Then the next thing you know, it's like, okay, I'll just kind of fit in. And that's exactly what we end up doing. I mean, look at, you know, what we women wear for our outfits. We wear suits. That's a man's uniform. You know, I have a story, the Vera Bradley backpack story that I'll share with you, which is somewhat indicative of how this played out for real life for me. I was visiting a new client at their corporate offices, beautiful building in downtown Chicago. And I had a first meeting with brand new project, big deal, high level. I've been brought in to help out. I was very pleased to do that and looking forward to it. The man that brought me in was actually an old friend of mine. He'd been a client off and on for years and years. And he trusted in me, and he kind of tapped me to come in from the outside as a consultant to help this. So I said, okay, I'm there with you. So we're kicking off the first day, and we've arrived at the building, and we're taking the express elevator up to one of the top floors that has this beautiful view of the skyline. And I'm thinking, this is great. I'm pretty excited. And I've got on my, you know, the suit, the uniform. And I thought it would be kind of nice to have my Vera Bradley backpack. You know the look? Paisley, really kind of cute. It wasn't too loud. And I'll tell you, I'm not a large person, so a big backpack or a briefcase or even a women's satchel that, you know, they're huge, does not look so good on me. And this was light, and it was cloth, and I actually thought this is going to work great. It's a nice compact size. So we're going up in the elevator together, and he leans over and looks at my backpack and says, "You may want to rethink the backpack." And I was thinking, rethink the backpack? Oh my God, have I made a horrible mistake? A fashion faux pas? Or just some sort of business faux pas? You may want to rethink the backpack. So we get up to the boardroom, and I immediately shoved it into a cabinet because I didn't want to embarrass him. I thought, he's bringing me in. I got to look pretty good for his sake, right? I don't want to embarrass him. I started thinking about it a little later. It kind of made me mad. Not at him, but it made me mad at the whole situation. And this is a superficial example of what we go through on a daily basis, these daily dilemmas that happen to us. I wanted something pretty and functional that didn't hurt my shoulders, and my shoulders aren't real strong, and I can't carry a 7-pound computer, and I have to have heels on anyway, and I have bad feet. My podiatrist has told me that I have bad foot mechanics. Does that mean I shouldn't be in a workplace? You know, no. It means I want to be able to adapt. I like having flowers on my desk. I like the Vera Bradley backpack. But why is it that that's something that's not really accepted? I mean, this happens with the way that we use collaboration as a decision-making method. Wouldn't you say? It's different than the way a man would do it. We're gatherers, they're hunters. We're looking for what people are thinking to solve a problem. They're looking for the answer, and then they're going to nail it. Now, that's kind of a simplistic Venus and Mars approach, but that really does happen, and there really is evidence to prove that the way that their brains function are different than ours. So when we're in these environments where we're overwhelmed by the way that other people are doing things, we start putting our own methods, our own feminine approaches under the rug. We let them go by the wayside. Now, I've got to wonder, what do you think that does to your ability to be effective? What do you think that does in order to make yourself comfortable and grow? Most women do not apply for, this is a study another study called the Gender Dividend by Deloitte. Most women do not apply for promotions or to move up the ladder because they don't feel that they're confident enough to get it, or that they're likely to get it. You know, there's a lot of things that go into play with this. I mean, you can hear all the mental stuff that's going on in our head. Whether you're really, really confident or whether you're not, you've got a lot of mechanics in the workplace that keep you from being as effective as a man who maybe doesn't have to haul the kids around, right? So I think we need to do two things. I think first of all, we really need to take a look at how we see our role and how we need to develop it, as I said. So how we see our role, one thing that's critical is, what are you doing with your work-life balance? And it doesn't balance. We all know that it doesn't balance. What are you doing with your work-life sanity? And do you have a partner in your home life that is carrying half the weight? You know, part of this is self-imposed. I completely agree. I like being the one that's keeping the house cleaner. I like being the one that's figuring out what we're going to have for meals. But my God, I can't do it all the time. You know, design the meal, shop for the meal, cook for the meal, and clean up the meal, and that happens, you know, every night on a weeknight and then all over the weekend. How about the kids, hauling them around? Now, I've got a husband that does all of that and more, if I ask. If I ask. I still take ownership over it, though. I'm still the one that's kind of looking out for, what do I need to delegate to him? What's he going to pick up and run? And he does do it, but it's still, I feel like it's the burden. So what do you do in your role to help manage that so that you can indeed have a career that's fulfilling but not killing? Okay? What do you do for your own personal development? At Skirt Strategies, we say, think globally. Think of this situation globally that's kind of depressing and where we want to change it. Think globally and act personally. Find your own little world of where you want to be better at leadership and managing your life, and help make that change. Think globally, act personally. What are some of the skills that you want to be doing more naturally? What do you want to look at? I don't believe that it has to be the most complicated leadership approach. That's one of the reasons, the genesis of Skirt Strategies, the book 249. That's right, there's not 250. I just ran out of ideas at 249. And so I figured that was a good place to stop. 249 success tips for women in leadership. I mean, I don't think it has to be complicated. I think it has to be self-management, a lot of balancing in order to stay sane. I think you let some things go. And I think you look at where you want to be fulfilled and you find that little niche in the world and you help make that fulfilled. So when it comes to women in leadership, I feel so passionate about it because of those fascinating statistics and the data and what's happening nationally. It's a good thing. I also know that men love working with women, so we're not talking about taking over the world. I don't think we want to do that. I think a gender-balanced workplace, I know a gender-balanced workplace is really healthy for a business as well, and it helps us feel more fulfilled. So that's where I urge you to go. I'm going to leave you with two tips from the book that I feel strongly about. They kind of come back to me every once in a while, and some of these in here, by the way, are just kind of light and frivolous, and others are more serious about, you know, how to run a meeting. But the first of the two that I want to leave with you is number 153. Good approaches to being a great leader are easy to find. Don't tour the world looking for the best. Find a decent, simple one and live by it. And then the very last one, number 249, that I left in the book is something that all of us should focus on being. Number 249 is strive to be someone's role model. And when you've achieved that, and when you're shooting for that, even though it's a process and not a destination, you'll find that you're making your own little impact on the world, you're making your own little area of meaning, and it's where we become fulfilled as women. So, thank you for joining me today.
In the industry that I'm in the commercial industry, and it's dominantly men that are in our industry. I went to Katie and I said, Katie, how do I deal with this man talk and everything about men? And she helped me through it one-on-one. There wasn't a day that I couldn't just call her up on the phone and say, Katie, you know, this and this happened. How do I deal with it? And she was just so analytical, she just thought it through. And so what Katie has shared with me and worked with me on a one-to-one basis is don't ever lose your identity. You're a woman, and it's okay to work in a man's world. So I've always held on to that, and I contribute a lot of my success in the 7 years of being in the commercial industry to her counseling and her advice that she gave me. She enjoys what she's doing. She believes in it, and I think it's so neat that she has that passion which rubs off on everyone else when she's talking to them or helping them, training them or counseling them.